Welcome to my show. This week is Who's in the House with Michael. I have my distinguished guest, David Cantor, with us. I know nothing about you, David, and I love that because I'm curious. I'm going to ask a lot of questions. All right. So, welcome to our show.
Hey, Michael, thanks for having me. How's the connection? Can you hear me okay?
Real good.
Okay, great.
Solid. So, David, where were you born and raised?
So just north of New York City in Rockland County. So, downstate, sort of suburbs of New York City.
Got it. Right. When you were growing up, hobbies and interests?
Oh, I was a soccer kid for sure. Um, that didn't last much beyond junior high, high school. But I was always into food, always loved a good meal, that type of thing for sure.
Do you come from a family that has a strong culture of food and cooking? Like, I got an Italian family. There's a lot of food in that.
There's a lot of food. There's a heavy Italian influence in how my mom cooked for sure. So grew up in a household with where food was certainly central to everything. And then took that with me to college and beyond, of course.
Your name doesn't reveal Italian food any more than my name reveals that I'm Hebrew. So it's very confusing, right?
There you go. It's great.
So, all right, cool. So, what about your parents? What kind of work did they do?
My mother mostly raised us kids when we were young, but actually ended up sort of having a career change midlife. Ended up graduating from college actually the same weekend I graduated from college. So it was a little
Okay.
bit of sort of an incredible milestone. Ended up pursuing sort of a late career in education, in her 40s and 50s and 60s.
Sweet.
And my father was sort of a civil servant early in his career and ended up sort of putting himself through law school, ended up becoming also a little bit of a midlife career change, ended up becoming a lawyer, I think deep into his 40s, late 40s.
Wow. That's awesome. And kudos to your mom for raising a family and enjoying that and doing all the things that are around it and then taking life, under control for herself and doing something for herself.
For sure. For
I love
sure. That
that.
was great.
Um, were there family hobbies that everybody did together? I mean, was sports a kind of a thing? You have siblings? Were they on the field all the time?
I have two sisters. So one pursued ballet pretty professionally. She was actually a professional ballerina for New York City Ballet and Miami City Ballet. And I had another sister who sort of pursued competitive figure skating. And I
Uh,
pursued soccer, which was probably the most straightforward and common of the three. But by the time we, were in high school, that was essentially more or less behind us, and we all went on to sort of pursue our careers.
your sister that was a figure skater over by the time she finished high school?
Definitely by high school. I don't know what age. I don't know when she stopped. 16, 17, something like that.
Fast sidebar. I went to school at Paul Smith's College up in the Adirondacks, about 40 miles west of Lake Placid, New York. So I spent a lot of time in Lake Placid, Olympics, Winter Games. I ended up dating a figure skater, a professional figure skater for a few minutes. Second sidebar. Last night we're watching Blades of Glory, one of our favorites. Hilarious. And my wife knows that whole skating scene. So it just made me think of that when you said figure skating. I went right to the movie and right to all that stuff.
That's great. Yeah, yeah. Great movie. And I mean, it feels like ancient history. We're all now middle-aged and gray and, have families and things like that. It's sort of ancient history, but it was, sort of foundational experiences for sure.
So did you go to college after high school?
Yeah, so I grew up in New York. I'll tell you my life story like really quickly, like the 2 minute version. So grew up in the New York suburbs, went to school at the University of Wisconsin in Madison. I was a psychology major, but ended up becoming very interested in food and sustainability. In fact, they didn't have minors, but if they had minors there, I would have qualified as like a probably an ecology or sort of sustainability minor. Um, and took those interests and moved west, moved out to New Mexico, and got an apprenticeship on an organic farm.
Okay.
Learned everything I could ever want to learn, ever really want to know about running my own organic farm. Did that sort of training for a year, and then ran my own farm for a couple of
I
years.
want to rewind because I have 100 questions.
Yeah, yeah.
While you're at
This
school
is the
for
2 minute version.
psychology, while you're at school for psychology, I can imagine sustainability wasn't a conversation back then. It's only in the last 10 years or so we started talking about it. How did that come around back then? And how did the food interest come around back then?
Great question. So I was always sort of interested in psychology and human behavior and emotions and things like that. That was all sort of that was an interest of mine in high school and into college. It was logical for me to major in that. But as the college years progressed, my focus, my interest sort of shifted to things like sustainability, which was not as buzzy as it is today, but it was a word. It was in the vernacular in when I was in college in the 90s. So,
Okay.
um, so at the same time, I was also really learning how to cook more seriously. I cooked for 30 people twice a week. It was sort of this big to do. I took it pretty seriously. The food was coming from, this was school in the Midwest.
So was that on the farm? You
Nope, this
cooked
was
there?
in college,
Okay.
but I lived in this big sort of co-op type of environment where everyone had to have a job and it kept our rents down. So very
Oh,
sort of cheap, inexpensive rent, but to help pay the bills, we everyone had to sort of chip in. So this was like an alternative to a dorm. And so very inexpensive. I had to cook for 30 people twice a week. I took that very seriously. I learned how to cook pretty seriously. And I started paying more and more attention to where our food was coming from. Some of it was coming from the grocery store. Some of it was coming from the backyard garden. Some of it was coming from our local farms. I started getting to know those farmers who were dropping off greens or eggs or honey or whatever it was, and then started visiting those farms. And more and more, my focus was on really sustainable agriculture. So when I graduated, I said, I really want to learn more about this. I don't necessarily want to pursue a career in farming forever, but this is an experience I'm interested in. Found a farm out in New Mexico that essentially was a not-for-profit farm that trained young, sort of aspiring organic farmers. Okay. So I was like, sign me up. Moved out to New Mexico, learned how to farm, eventually ran my own farm, and then moved back east and ended up going to school in Boston for really food and agriculture policy.
all
So
right. Stop here.
yeah.
Stop here because I
Mhm.
got more questions, Gary. So first of all, in the time you're getting into this sustainability and farming, fresh farming stuff, organics, you're at cutting edge basically at this point. It's really a new movement. I'm a little older than you, so I graduated in the 80s. And in the restaurant business, where my audience knows I did a long career, and I remember watching what we had available to us from the purveyors, from the Cisco houses and things like that. And I remember it evolving over the years to where we started getting really good, really fresh, pre-made things that were really usable along the way. I remember agriculturally, we were growing wheat in the 80s to export to all these other countries, Russia and everywhere else. We were trying to feed the world. And I now looking back understand that that's when we started genetically modifying plants so that we could produce the volume and the quality to get there. And now here we are 30 years later, looking back and saying, well, maybe that went too far, and maybe all these modified foods our body's struggling with. And that's where the real focus, I think, comes in on organic sustainability. Would you say that's a good look back?
I think that's a good look back. I think that's a good summary. I mean, it started that interest in like, sustainable agriculture and organic started really in those post-war years, really in like the post-World War II years with where there was this proliferation of sort of chemicals, initially petrochemicals that were developed really for the war and the military ended up finding their way into sort of agricultural uses through
Right,
pesticides, through fertilizers, things like that.
right.
And there were others who started wanting to sort of preserve more sustainable ways of doing things and not sort of spraying different chemicals on their land. And that was actually in the 40s through, well, people like Rodale and others who were really pioneers. So I don't want to say like 90s was like so pioneering. It was around. There were health food stores, there were food co-ops in the 80s and 90s and of course earlier. Um, but I think it started more and more to hit more of the mainstream and more of like the public consciousness around probably around that time, 90s and beyond. And then, of course, the proliferation, the growth of Whole Foods and things like that. So,
When did you meet your wife in this cycle of moving out west and the farming and then coming back east?
yeah, so I moved east for grad school. That was like the early 2000s. And then upon graduation, I took a job in New Jersey. And then I finally moved to New Jersey, which is where I'm still based. I've been in New Jersey for 20 years. I took a job for with M&M Mars in a
Mm,
new division called really health and nutrition, which was really like a skunk works division, sort of charged with helping them diversify their portfolio into really better for you snacks. And I
okay.
worked there and I joined as like a junior marketer and worked there for I think just about 5 years. And really over the past 20 years, sort of climbed the marketing ladder in natural and organic.
Wait,
Yeah.
you
And
might be. Oh, okay. Yeah, I thought your mute was on. We blanked out for a couple seconds, but you're good now.
oh, you're okay. So I worked there for about 5 years, climbed the marketing ladder in New Jersey. I met my wife during those last few years of my time at Mars, and I spent the like my last job before founding this new company, Folk Revival, which I'll talk to you about, was I spent 8 years running marketing, R&D and innovation for a company called Dr. Prager's, which is best known as a veggie burger company. They make lots of things, great
Yeah.
things. Frozen veggie burgers is what they're best known for. So I helped sort of steer marketing and innovation for that company for 8 years. I joined in 2013. I stayed until 21, and we grew that business really aggressively. And
Does your wife have a career?
yeah, yeah, yeah. So my wife is a veterinarian.
Excellent. So I know you love animals because I saw your pooch in the back there a minute ago. He got on camera, got a little airtime. And you have children, did you tell me?
I have a 14-year-old daughter.
You're busy.
Mhm.
That's a busy age. So when you back out west, when you were on the farming, in organic farming, were you learning how to utilize different spaces on the farm during different seasons to change the chemistry of the soil to maximize efficiency? Was it kind of like that kind of stuff you were learning at that point?
Yeah, so it was a mixed there's lots of kinds of farms, right? You can grow, corn and soybeans, or you can grow, lots and lots of things. So this was really a mixed vegetable farm. So think of specialty greens and specialty tomatoes that we would sell at a farmer's market or to some very high-end restaurants in Santa Fe and Albuquerque,
We call these microgreens now.
microgreens, super
Yeah.
greens, things like, even things like arugula. Back then, we're talking about this is the 90s. We're talking about things like arugula was pretty exotic.
I
Um,
remember when kale was a garnish for the plate.
that's right.
We
Or
buy
or
it
an
by the box, tear a piece, and garnish a plate and send it out. Now it's part of our diet.
right, or it was an ornamental, like in a pot outside the restaurant.
Yeah.
So I mean that's what we grew. We also sold, produce to our neighbors. We had like a subscription with other people in the community. A very small scale, very small acreage, but very intensively planted. So
I love that you have this corporate background at Mars. You're putting together a lot of pieces here in your life. You've got the psychology and the interest of how people think and perceive things working in the background of your brain. Your interest in the farming and organics and food. You're building these blocks. You go into the corporate world. You see how they're processing. You see how they're putting together. You see their marketing and kind of bringing products to market and how to identify the markets. And now here you are, and you've started your own company. Is it a good time to start talking about that?
sure, sure. So I left Dr. Prager's at the end of 21, and I got started on building out a new brand of my own. I had spent 20 years sort of building like pretty small, high growth, natural and organic food brands for others. I really wanted to do something for myself and had this idea that I think, as you were starting to say, was sort of brought together all of these different experiences from sort of sustainable agriculture and studying food policy to working in the corporate world for 20 years to everything. And I founded a brand here. For those who are watching, I'll hold it up to the camera. It's
Okay,
called Folk Revival. Um,
very good.
and the brand is really focused on delivering like real functional nutrition by reviving heirloom and heritage foods.
Okay.
That's where
So when you say heirloom and heritage, you mean before we modified these plants?
That's right. So the hero ingredient. So this is a hot cereal cup. We have four flavors. I won't hold them up again. We have four flavors. They're sort of like oatmeal, but it's oat free. It's grain free, and it's very high protein, 20 grams of protein. It's very low carb, less than 5 grams of net carbs, and it's made with acorns. And it's not the first ingredient, but it's sort of the hero ingredient that we've been sort of talking about because we're sort of the first brand to bring acorns to market. Now, I'll tell you a little bit about acorns because everyone's familiar with acorns, right? We know what
Sure.
they look like. They drop in our backyards or whatever it is, or they drop, in the park. They're not eaten for the most part in North America, but they are eaten in pockets around the world, and they've been eaten for ages. They're still eaten today in some parts of the Mediterranean, parts of Asia. In North America, the only people that really eat them are sort of like prepper types. So there's a lot of prepper types that are into
Yep.
wild harvesting stuff and
Sure.
being able to survive off the land. And then there's sort of like a prized heritage food among some Native American tribes.
Okay.
So we're the first sort of packaged food brand that's really bringing acorns to a wider audience
So
in.
is that the main part of this of the ingredients in the folk food?
No, it's somewhere in the middle. The first ingredient is hemp, which is another sort of heritage ingredient that has been consumed for a long, long time. But there's, this is what it is it's a sort of a high protein, low carb alternative to oatmeal. So oatmeal is
So
great.
is the protein coming from the acorn pretty much?
It's essentially a cup of like nuts and seeds.
Yeah,
So
love that.
the protein is coming from essentially nuts and seeds.
How do you recommend to consume this new cereal? Is it going to be mixed with like a maybe a yogurt, like a parfait, or is it hot water and kind of like an oatmeal style?
Yeah, it's like an oatmeal. So it's a single serve cup. It's super convenient. You can throw it in your bag, in your purse, whatever it is, and bring it to work. You could pour hot water, into it, put it, and stir and let it sit for a minute. It only takes a minute to make, or you can put cold water in, put it in the microwave, 45 seconds later, it's like you have essentially a cup of hot cereal or oatmeal. Again, it's oat free, it's grain free, but it sort of cooks up and sets up on your spoon, sort of just like oatmeal, sticks to your ribs much better than oatmeal does. And you can dress it up a lot. You can replace the water with oat milk or almond milk or whatever. You can treat it like overnight oats if you like it cold. Just prep it the night before, put it in your fridge, treat it like overnight. You can dress up sliced bananas or berries into it. I mean, there's actually been some recipes that you could find on our social pages, like to make pancakes or chocolate chip cookies. You could do things like that that are really fun, but it's really just plain and simple hot cereal. Tastes
I
great.
love it. I love that kind of stuff. And let me tell you something. I'm going to throw another curveball at you. In between me finishing restaurant operations and doing what I do now, I also ran a manufacturing company. I had to produce a product line. We started with one. I had to add 10. I had to get distribution. I had to get USDA approval. And I closed the factory, opened a better factory. I got us into distribute. So I kind of get a little bit of this business. Where are you at in that life cycle now? I know you said you had four products. Where can we get it? How's all that going?
So essentially 23, we just launched a year ago. 23 was our launch year. You can go to folkrevival.com to learn more, place an order. We're on Amazon, we're on a bunch of e-commerce sites, and in 23 we sort of learned as much as we could. We ended up making some tweaks to our messaging, a little bit to our recipes, things like that. And sort of rolled those out at the end of 23. We also just got distribution at Whole Foods along the East Coast. So those are just hitting shelves now. You can find Folk Revival throughout the East Coast in their four eastern regions,
That's
170 stores,
wow, good for
and
you.
and 10 accounts in Texas called Central Market, which is like a very important retailer down in Texas, and a few other accounts that we haven't announced yet, but that we'll be announcing soon.
That's amazing news, but it also comes with a little bit of stress having to produce that level of volume now, right?
Right. So that's right. Everything is sort of scaled up. So that has led us to like, we've needed to raise money. We actually created a crowdfunding campaign. I don't know if you or your listeners are familiar with crowdfunding, but it's this sort of great mechanism. It's almost like this democratization of like venture capital, like the very low minimums people can invest with just like $100, but then own a piece of a food company.
Okay.
Um, and there's more information on our, on our website on that, folkrevival.com. Or if you want, I can share a link, or you could drop that, in the comments or something.
Yep. Where are you producing now? Where's your factory? Your
So I'm based in New Jersey. We make this product in Canada, and I'm
okay.
back and forth to Canada virtually every month. That's about the
Okay.
frequency with which we're making it.
I get that. All right, great. What's your long-term goal for distribution? Will this be on, would it be something you want in every grocery store in a healthy aisle, or you really want to keep it limited to places like Whole Foods that represent high quality and fresh and
Well,
organic?
eventually, I mean, so historic again, I've been working on natural and organic brands for 20 years on the marketing side. So the typical sort of trajectory is for these natural brands to sort of start in the natural channel at places like Whole Foods or Sprouts or others, and then sort of cross over to the mainstream, like depending on where you live, the Krogers, the ShopRites, right? When they achieve some degree of scale. So I think our trajectory will look similar to that. We'll sort of start in the natural channel and like earn our stripes and prove it all out. And when we have a larger loyal following, we'll start to dip our toe in sort of the conventional grocery water. We're not quite ready for that yet.
It's amazing. I mean, pe people don't realize what goes into this. It's not just developing a product, coming up with a recipe, proving it out. It's way beyond that. Once you go into production, scaling up, where are you getting your ingredients from? Testing those ingredients, making sure you're getting ingredients that represent you, and then proving that out in a recipe. I mean, there's a lot going on here. You're the marketing guy, right? In your company now, you probably wear a lot of hats.
Yeah, yeah. So that's right. So there's more to it than that. You also want to always get better, right? Like I don't think the product was perfect when we first launched on day one. The product is so much better than it was a year ago. So there's sort of this spirit of like continuous improvement as well that I think we're trying to bake into the brand. I have 5 partners on this brand who are all also like industry veterans and like rock stars who are
Awesome.
helping push this brand forward, move this brand forward. And they're all adding value. Like, there's no way I could have done this alone.
So, what role do you play in the group in terms of building the company?
So I'm the founder, I'm the CEO. And then, I mean, I'll very candidly, as things progressed, I knew I couldn't do it alone. So I had to, it started with sort of one partner who helped with the logo and the packaging. And then sort of as the needs evolved, and I think I was able to see this coming. And I was like, eventually we're going to need a finance person. And I brought the former CFO from Dr. Prager's, where I used to work, who is now sort of on the market, brought her over. So she's acting like a fractional CFO. And I was like, eventually we're going to need social media. So I reached out to someone I used to work with and loved working with in the past. I was like, you want to work on this? So it's like slowly but surely sort of built this team of partners. They're all putting in sweat equity, and they all have their lanes, right? And they're all adding a ton of value.
Are you the food guy in the group?
No, there are a bunch of us are food guys. I have one of the I have a product developer, a food scientist who's actually a partner on the brand. So I created the initial recipe, but she really made it better. So
Wow.
and she is she's a veteran product developer with a food science degree and background with, 30 years experience.
It takes a lot of confidence to quit your job and start your own company. It takes a lot of confidence, and I applaud you for that because that's what the American dream is built on, but not everybody can make it. And it seems like you're doing really, really good stuff here. Where do you see your product line developing, or how do you see it developing beyond different flavors? Are there other products that might come into the line?
Great question. Yes. So we're starting with hot cereal, but the vision here is not that we're like gonna be an oatmeal or a hot cereal company, right? The vision here is that we're really gonna be a natural foods company. Our next platform is not hot cereal. I'm not going to disclose exactly what it is, but it's not a hot cereal, it's not an oatmeal, it's not in a cup, but it is a breakfast. And we're essentially going to innovate by moving into some of these sort of adjacent breakfast categories, which has a lot of efficiencies. Both, I mean, it's often the same sort of category managers or buyers at the retailer. So these relationships we're making with retailers now, I don't have to meet a frozen buyer or a dairy buyer. It's still sort of the breakfast buyer. So there's a
I
lot.
could easily see you developing protein bars out of this, snack bars, things like that. Do you have to work with food brokers out there as the intermediary to get into places?
Yeah, so we have a national sales broker who is actually an investor in the brand. We have a few interesting investors in the brand. One is our Acorn vendor is an investor in the brand, and
Nice.
our factory up in Canada is an investor in the brand, and our national sales broker is a third sort of we're sort of creating this. I mean, this is all just transpired over the past year. So this is essentially this little infrastructure that we're building, and the people who've gotten to know the brand the best and me, these three investors, they've sort of put their money where their mouth is. They were willing to really get behind this and lean into this project, and it's helping us move the ball down the field for sure.
I'm really excited about this for you. I mean, this really, like I said, I've dabbled in areas that go kind of adjacent to what you're doing. So it's very interesting to me. I kind of know what's involved. I kind of know what the road ahead is, but you seem like you're on a great trajectory right now. Right now, all I can think about is when I get off this call is to order some product and start tasting it because I do like to eat healthy. I don't always look like it, but I do like to eat healthy when I can.
That's great. That's well, I'm the same way. I'm not like totally zealous about it, but I try to eat as healthy as I can, and I only really want to put healthy products out there. I feel like, in this world, like you can choose what you want to contribute to, and I feel like this is sort of my calling.
And the other thing too is there's a lot of products being sold and marketed that are healthy that really aren't. You start reading the ingredients as things we don't recognize what they are. So we all now have to become scientists and really start understanding the chemistry of this stuff. And the other thing is there's a lot of mixed information about some of these ingredients and chemicals and things that are in our food. Is it bad? Is it good? We've been hearing oatmeal's great. Now I'm starting to hear oatmeal may not be so good for us. I don't know if that's true or not, but there's so much noise out there.
I think that's with everything, whether it's nutrition, whether it's politics, right? It's the nature of the beast today. It's modern living. When it comes to Vogue Revival and the ingredients, we have very high standards. Like it's just real, simple, recognizable ingredients. Most of the things on our ingredient label you already have in your kitchen pantry at home. Like I said, it's essentially nuts and seeds. So very simple, very straightforward, but it's blended together to taste really good. It has to taste good. That's the only way brands succeed, right? You can market the health benefits to the moon, but if it
Right.
doesn't taste good, people aren't going to really stick with it. And people are sticking with Boca Raton. We have our first consumers who are buying. Again, we've only been around for a year, but we have our first consumers who've now purchased 12 times. So they're essentially buying, once a month, and they're buying enough to, eat every day for breakfast or maybe weekdays for breakfast and really integrate into their morning regimen, which has been terrific to see.
Where do you see yourself a year from now? If I bring it back to interview, what are you going to tell me we did last year?
So I hope that when we talk a year from now, I hope I'm telling you that we were really successful in raising money so that we could achieve sort of our distribution and brand building objectives. It
Yeah.
does take capital to really pull this off. So
Yeah.
we've raised over $150,000 on that We Funder campaign that I mentioned, which is a great start, and we're seeing it sort of tick up, and we're seeing a lot of great interest from just everyday people. It's a very low minimum, so you don't have to be rich to invest. It's $100, and you get to own a little piece of this sort of fast growing natural food company with this sort of stellar team that's really growing.
It
Uh,
does take a lot of money, and it's not a lot of money just for the obvious things that we would all know about in business,
mhm.
right? But for example, in a restaurant, we lay out some money, we buy the food, we cook it, we serve it, we collect the money, we start to cycle over again. In a distribution business like you're in, you've got to have inventory ahead of time. You can't wait for an order to come to first try to fill that order. You got to get ahead of those orders. You got to anticipate those orders. So a lot of money is invested in production and inventory long before you make the sale. And then you got to cross your fingers.
Well, then you have to cross your fingers that you actually get paid within 30 or 60 days.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a tough business. It's like the hardest way to actually make a living, but I love it. I know the industry really well. All of my friends are in this industry. I've grown up in this industry really for 20 years. So I love it, but it is a tough industry, and a lot of brands struggle. But I think we have a lot of wind in our sails because of the experience of my partners and I. So we're not rookies at this.
And it sounds like not just only do you have the passion for this, but it sounds like the team that you've built around you is passionate as well. So it's a united front with a long-term goal, and everyone's passionate. That's what I'm feeling through this conversation.
Yeah, and you have to have sort of the vision. Your question about like where do you want to be in a year? Like, we're laser focused on what our objectives are for 2024. Like I said, we're just rolling out to Whole Foods now. We really need to ensure that we succeed at Whole Foods. It's not as simple as putting it on the shelf and crossing your fingers. You really have to like pull some levers to ensure that the product is successful at Whole Foods. They say in this industry that the easy part is getting it on the shelf. The hard part is sort of getting it off the shelf, right?
Yeah,
Getting people to
reorder. Yeah.
that's right. So that's what we're going to be focused on in 24. We're raising money is a sort of a key objective for the year, and we have a sort of similar sort of list of objectives for the next 3 years. We have a pretty clear pathway of where we want to be, through. I almost want to say through the decade. It's not that far out, but
Well, you have to have a short-term plan, a mid-range plan, and a
you need
long,
to know where
because
you're going.
if you don't know where you're going, any road gets you there.
That's right.
Dave, you've been awesome this afternoon. I want to tell you, I will have your product in my house within a week. I'm going to go to Whole Foods as soon as I can and get it. And if I can't find it locally here, I'm going to order it off your website. I want to remind everybody, the full-length interview here will be on my YouTube channel, and will also be on Spotify. Who's in the House with Michael? I have a YouTube channel. I'd love for people to see the whole thing. But we're also going to have pieces of this interview clipped and put on TikTok and Instagram and everywhere else. When Charlie does the final production on this video, we will have all your contact information up so people could go to the website, find a product, engage you, and hopefully help you build this great company.
Michael, thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Did I miss anything today?
No, it's a great conversation. I loved it.
Awesome. David, thank you so much. It was great having you today.
Thanks so much. Take care.